solved all the easy problems. They're all hard, and they require bipartisan solutions. I'm proud to be bipartisan.
Hi, I'm Ian Bremmer, and welcome to the GZERO World Podcast, an audio version of what you can find on public television, where I analyze global topics, sit down with big guests, and make use of small puppets. This week, I sit down with the first female director of what's been an all-boys club. Former U.S. Congresswoman Jane Harman is here. She took time away from her job atop the Woodrow Wilson Center to talk national security, women in Congress, as well as that old dream of bipartisanship. She says these days, that's a dirty word. Let's get to it.
The GZERO World is brought to you by our founding sponsor, First Republic. First Republic, a private bank and wealth management company, places clients' needs first by providing responsive, relevant, and customized solutions. Visit firstrepublic.com to learn more.
Jane Harman, the president and CEO of the Wilson Center, and 9-term Congresswoman, the 36th in California, Harvard, JD, all sorts of other things. Great to be with you.
It's my tennis prowess.
It is your tennis prowess.
That's my thing.
That could be the most important thing. But maybe I'll start with Congress. What's the thing that people don't understand about how life will or will not change with this new Congress?
Well, at least at the moment, Congress is a re-election machine. It's not a policy machine. And I think people don't get it, that the Congress they may remember somewhere vaguely in the history books that has played a role as the Article I branch of government. Our Constitution has 3 branches. Congress is 1, the executive branch is 2, and the courts are 3. That old Article I branch of government doesn't do Article I things anymore. It just helps each party get reelected. And that, to me, is a real tragedy for the country.
What led to that?
Probably many things, but the technology now used in campaigns had a lot to do with it. What was exciting to me about serving in Congress was the chance to work on policy. That's why I loved Congress when it was a policy machine. And there are still glimmers of hope. What happened recently in Congress on Yemen was exciting in the Senate.
Let us go forward today and tell the world that the United States of America will not continue to be part of the worst humanitarian disaster on the face of the earth.
The motion is agreed to.
A bipartisan majority, look at that word, bipartisan, majority of the Senate, denied the use of U.S. military aid to prosecute the war in Yemen.
Leaving aside the fact that Congress does less than it used to, fewer policies are made, it's harder to reach bipartisan consensus. What are the places that you would expect to see change with a few more Republicans on the Senate side, with a lot more Democrats and a majority on the House side?
Well, I hope that the Democratic majority in the House will be about more than impeachment. In fact, I think impeachment is the wrong place to start, and I know that Speaker Pelosi doesn't want to start with impeachment. I would hope that the Democratic majority in the House would do investigations where necessary, and some are, but also would come up with, and this will be hard because there's a diverse caucus there, come up with some program to lead the country forward.
How do you resist calls to begin impeachment proceedings given the amount and breadth of information coming down around obstruction of justice, around lying on engagement with the Russians, all these things?
I've seen the movie. I was a staffer in the Senate in the early 70s, 200 years ago, when Richard Nixon was impeached by the House on a bipartisan basis.
Our entire focus should be on the great issues of peace abroad and prosperity without inflation at home.
George, come up.
Therefore, I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow.
He resigned before the Senate could begin conviction proceedings. I mean, if
that
you're
was
impeached,
coming.
that doesn't mean
Right.
you're
That's in the
found
House.
guilty.
Right.
That's the indictment. And then the Senate does the conviction. I was also a member in the House in the late 90s when Bill Clinton was impeached. I voted against the impeachment counts, not that I excused him for his conduct, but I didn't think it rose to a level of a high crime or misdemeanor.
At this point, there are 3 votes shy, and we have every reason to expect it's at 217 and at 218.
Here it is.
There it is. President William Jefferson Clinton is now the 2nd president in the history of the United States to be impeached.
And then he was, the Senate failed to convict, but it certainly did go to the Senate. But business stopped, and I think there are crucial things to do in this country, which is why I am for, and I think Leader Pelosi is for, beginning serious investigations in a number of committees. The Committee on Oversight, Elijah Cummings is very capable. The House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff, who is leaving the job I had as ranking member to become chairman, is very capable. Jerry Nadler, who was a classmate of mine, elected in '92 on the Judiciary Committee, I think is responsible too. So have investigations of the right pieces of this. And make sure that the House is doing its oversight job, but put impeachment off.
At what is the level that you think findings of those investigations reach a point where you have to actually proceed with impeachment?
We'll know it when we see it. It's
like pornography.
Yeah, it's like pornography. We'll know it when we see it. And oh, by the way, those investigations should, to a maximum extent, be bipartisan. You would think that
Is that
certainly
remotely plausible, given what we've seen on both sides?
I think it's possible. I think it's remotely plausible. And I think it depends on how the new chairmen, I guess they're all men in these cases, behave.
Now, while
possibly.
you and I are talking, elsewhere in this building, there's an event going on that is debating whether or not we are in a Cold War, we the Americans, with the Chinese.
Right.
Your answer to that is?
No.
No. And we are not because?
We are in a dodgy patch with the Chinese, but
We call them a strategic competitor now.
yes, well, they are a strategic competitor, and in fact, our new defense strategy says that our competition with Russia and China is what we need to focus on even more than counterterrorism. By labeling it that way, you make it worse, and that we are in a strategic competition. There are possibilities that we could agree on concepts. That's something Henry Kissinger recently said here. And we could agree on a way to work toward those concepts. But automatically saying we're at war, just like saying we were or are in a war on terror, is not a frame that encourages a good outcome.
What's a concept that we can work on?
Trade. There has to be a way for us to trade with China, a huge market for U.S. ag and products that our consumers want to buy at low cost. And for China, we are a huge market for all the goods they produce. So there has to be a way forward on trade.
Are you happy that the Trump administration is taking this issue up, is pushing the Chinese in areas that the Americans find their behavior to be unacceptable?
Yes. I think intellectual property theft and demands that our companies have to basically share their trade secrets with China if they want to do business in China are wrong. And they should have been called on it years ago. And calling them is right. I just think the way we're trying to process this is wrong. And threatening increased tariffs already has had a consequence, which is that the U.S. auto industry is closing plants. And maybe people don't want to buy more sedans. Okay, they want something else. But the price of parts for cars has gone up.
Now, the CEO of GM, in closing those plants, Mary Barra, she said that it wasn't because of the Trump decisions on tariffs. You suggesting that might be for public consumption?
I don't know what her reasons were, but certainly The cost of goods has gone up, and I think consumer taste has changed.
Now, you said we're in a rough patch with the Chinese. You could make an argument that we're kind of in a rough patch globally. I don't just mean the United States, but I mean, given the asymmetries with Russia, the challenges of China, the weakness in Europe, the difficulties in the Middle East. If you were to make a suggestion of one or two things the Americans could do that are not remotely plausible, but that are plausible, that would make a difference, that would make it feel like we were making progress, that actually this environment was going to get better as opposed to more rough patch, what would that be?
Well, I do a couple of things. They can be implausible. You already said that, right?
I know.
Ian?
I wanted them to be plausible.
Okay. How about hug our allies? Maybe that's...
You mean physically?
I mean...
Well, you and I could start this.
Well,
Make it a road show.
We could hug our allies and work with them to revitalize international institutions.
So if we start adding up a whole bunch of policies that we nominally support and believe in but have no intention of really doing anything towards, the Russians must leave Ukraine, Assad must go, there must be a two-state solution for Israel-Palestine. At what point do you say to yourself, as someone with your kind of background and experience, it's hurting the Americans to not be credible, we need to just be honest about what we're actually doing here? Do you have a view on that?
I actually like that formulation. We can't do everything. I agree with that. But what we can do is live our values. We're struggling with that a little bit at the moment. I mean, I think carrying kids away from parents at borders is not one of those values. Blocking people from, 5 or 7 countries from coming here just because they come from 5 or 7 countries is not one of our values.
Well, a lot of political leaders, and not just in the United States, on so many of these issues seem to be incapable of focusing on the things that are going to affect their kids. So it's not about 20 or 40 years out, it's about an electoral cycle that's a few months or a couple of years out.
So that's what I said when we started this interview. Mm-hmm. Congress is a re-election machine. And the election cycle in the House is 2 years. The election cycle in the Senate is 6 years, but you have to raise umpteen bazillion dollars to run a Senate campaign. Actually, now you have to do for a House campaign, too. And there's all this independent money floating around. So if that's what you focus on, it's like quarterly earnings. And you can't even focus on your kids. You can't even see your kids because you're so busy dialing for dollars. So it's a race to the bottom. And the history of Congress is a noble history. Sure, there have been big fights. Got it. But it's the Article I branch of government. It's the first branch. It's what the founders thought would be it seems to me, the engine of our democratic republic. I was really proud to be elected there. It's hard to get elected. I won 17 races for the House, including primaries. And in one of my primaries, I was called a traitor and a spy. I mean, this tells you what my own party thought.
They were on to you early, Jane.
I was also called an agent of communist China by a Democrat. But hey.
Well, that's why you said they're not in a Cold War with us, of course.
Now
we understand.
So the dream of an effective Congress empowers me. We've solved all the easy problems. They're all hard, and they require bipartisan solutions. I'm proud to be bipartisan. And the U.S. can do so much better. We could do it tomorrow if we decided and we had the political will to do it.
Jane Harman, thank you very much.
That's our show this week. We'll be right back here next week, same place, same time, unless you're watching on social media, in which case it's wherever you happen to be. Don't miss it. In the meantime, check us out at GZEROmedia.com.
The GZERO World is brought to you by our founding sponsor, First Republic. First Republic, a private bank and wealth management company, places clients' needs first by providing responsive, relevant, and customized solutions. Visit firstrepublic.com to learn more.
You're listening to the GZERO World with Ian Bremmer podcast, your weekly geopolitical deep dive into the world's biggest news stories, featuring in-depth conversations with global leaders and newsmakers. To get more of GZERO's insights on global politics every morning, sign up for our free newsletter, GZERO Daily, at gzeromedia.com.